Those of you tonight who've come to see David Griffin talk, I must apologise, he had to cancel at the last minute. So Joe Lomax, who was one of the Truth Juice organisers, kindly stepped in. And tonight she's going to be talking about reincarnation and is it real? She's going to be, Jo, I'll just tell you a bit about Jo. She's a qualified counsellor, hypnotherapist herself and an EFT practitioner. And she has given some talks here before which are really, really good here at Truth Juice. And tonight she's going to be looking at reincarnation and whether past lives are real or imagined, and can going back into the past actually heal us in the present, and does hypnotherapy really work? Actually, we're going to talk about that as well. She's going to be looking at empirical research and evidence for past lives and reincarnation, and looking at a lot of case studies and showing some videos and evaluating this, and also talking about her own personal research and a summary of what happened to her when she had a past life regression. She was taken back to Waterloo. So without further ado, please put your hands together for Jo Lomax.
Help him switch it on. Thank you, welcome everybody. So yeah, it was quite a pleasure of mine to step in and do this talk because it's an area that I'm genuinely interested in, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people around the world are. They reckon 50% of the world's population actually believe in reincarnation. So the contents of this presentation today, I'm going to give you a textbook definition of what it's supposed to be, what actually sparked my interest, so just give you a bit of a background into why I became a hypnotherapist. And then some empirical evidence. Well, there's a video about a guy called Dr. Ian Stevenson, who is one of my favourite books on past lives because he spent 40 years literally documenting case studies. He had over 2,500 cases, and apparently 50% of those cases were proven. So some of the facts that these children gave, they proved the facts. They didn't prove past lives exist because that's very difficult to do, but the empirical evidence points towards that it potentially is the truth. I'm going to talk about a past life regression that I underwent myself with a local hypnotherapist, Steve Burgess, and then stories from people who I've hypnotised. And when I first went into doing hypnotherapy, past life wasn't really my thing, even though that's what got me into it. But what I experienced, and now we do some fact finding on Google, this is the bit where I can say, I saw this, I felt this. So I'm going to share what it looked and felt like to me. First of all, going in and being regressed myself, but also the experiences of those that I've hypnotised. And then there's another element I'm going to throw in today. There's an awful lot, if you look at things like this, there's loads of conspiracy theories everywhere, but there's a big question going round amongst the spiritual community who are agreeing that there's a conspiracy to stop us being who we are. And that is that we're actually being tricked and pulled back into the light. And I found a really fantastic Star Trek episode that explains what these spiritual people are pretty much saying, that we're being tricked when we actually go to the next dimension. And then I'm going to conclude, and then questions at the end. So if you do have questions in between though, please feel free to stick up your hands. Thank you. So the definition in the Oxford Dictionary, it's the rebirth of a soul in another body. Simple as that. And then in Wikipedia, that trusted source that we all rely on, the name of the idea that people are born into another body after they die. Lots of religions actually believe in reincarnation. Carnate means of flesh, and reincarnate means re-enter the flesh. So effectively it's saying we're a soul energy, a source, and we actually don't die, we just transform into another vessel to hold us in this actual dimension. So, my interest sparked, I did allude to this on the actual overview of this talk. I met a friend in India, we went to Africa together, and I didn't realise when we went there it was actually rainy season. The first week was by the pool and it was damp, there was no TV, it was really boring. So we went around this shopping centre and I just got my hands on this book. And I can't believe that mundane moment literally changed the direction of my whole life. And this book was called Many Lives, Many Masters by a guy called Dr. Brian Weiss. Now I was interested in reincarnation, but it never really triggered, it wasn't really in a conscious way, it was just something that I thought, oh, is it real or not? And when I read this book, my whole perspective completely changed, and it's pretty much what's opened my mind to lots of different things that I thought I knew before. And in this book, there's a lady who came with lots of phobias, lots of fears, And he regressed her, what he thought to this life, and she instantly went back to her past life. One experience, a leper in a cave, and her fear of enclosed spaces disappeared. So this triggered his interest, and then it turns out that he regressed her over 80 odd times to 80 odd different lives, and each time was curing these phobias that she was carrying in this life experience. So once I'd read this book, I thought, is that possible? First of all, is hypnosis real? Can we put somebody to a subconscious state and make suggestions that change the behaviour? So I was curious about that. I didn't know if I believed in it. And the other thing was, can we actually go and connect to past lives and that soul memory that carries forward? And it just absolutely triggered my interest. So that led me to go on some hypnotherapy courses. And I was quite pleased that I managed to get to train with a guy called Wilf Proudfoot out in Scarborough. Now, this guy was in his 90s and he was old school hypnotherapy. He used different techniques to what's pretty much out there today. So my very first course there, we actually learnt about past lives because he was very spiritual, very open-minded, and a very ethical guy. And at that time, I actually felt myself go back to meditating like a Buddhist monk, seeing a sunset. And that, I didn't know it was right or not, but in my mind, there was something that I could connect to that energy, to that moment, as I actually regressed then. So one of the things that's important to me is that we take the woo-woo out of this kind of subject, because people have this mindset that if you hypnotise people or if you meditate or they've got this hippie image, in reality it's actually science. There are facts that are proving it. And one of my favourites who actually has investigated this is a guy called Dr. Ian Stevenson. Now, a book that I've read is by Tom Schroeder, and he shadowed Ian Stevenson while he was out in Middle Eastern countries, because typically across there, those cultures, they believe in reincarnation, and if the children talk about past lives, they're actually encouraged by their families. Rather than the West, what we do, if somebody says I was born in a past life, we tell them not to be stupid and we cover it up and we don't want to face it. But actually in cultures outside of the UK, lots of people actually encourage this. And what he found was an abundance of these children claiming to have past lives. So he was a professor at, I think a psychologist at one of the universities in the USA, and he decided to change his life, and he spent 40 years literally documenting empirical evidence, and he didn't lie. He put everything very factual, and his findings were that he believes that past lives exist. Still, there's no real tangible proof, but if you read the facts, 50% of these 2,500 cases, there's something proven in it that's really beyond a doubt. So I'm going to play this video, just gives you an introduction to... Is it plugged in? Yeah. Gives you an introduction to Ian Stevens.
Hello, I'm Robert J. Sawyer, and this is Supernatural Investigator. This week, we investigate the concept of reincarnation. Half of the planet's population shares the same belief, that some part of us survives death, and that reincarnation is a real possibility. You may be surprised to learn that the most compelling support does not come from the world of religious or spiritual studies, but from the world of science. Tom Harper is one of those seeking answers, and this week, he's our supernatural investigator.
I've come to the point with regard to reincarnation that I think not only is it a worthy subject of investigation, but that the evidence strongly suggests that it may, in fact, be true. Well over 50% of the Earth's inhabitants believe in some form of reincarnation. So it's very widespread.
And for Tom Harper, the most compelling evidence comes from the work of the late Dr. Ian Stevenson and his successor, Dr. Jim Tucker.
This work began here at the University of Virginia back around 1960. Ian Stevenson was the chairman of the Department of Psychiatry. When he heard about these cases from various parts of the world of very young children who said that they remember previous lives, And he was curious enough where he decided to investigate and spent the next 40 years of his career traveling to various parts of the world. And he and his colleagues during that time, we've now collected over 2,500 cases of these young children who were making these claims. So then our task becomes trying to sort out what is this? What is causing kids to say this? And one way to test this is to see if what the child says actually matches a particular person who lived and died in the past.
Ian Stevenson would actually go to the city, take the child with him, and in some cases the child would point to specific places, bringing up specific dates and places and names. Of course, we can't rule out coincidence. We can pretty much rule out fraud in most cases because Dr. Stevenson was a very careful investigator.
He wrote in an academic style and like a lawyer, presenting the witnesses, where the evidence came from. He had subjects take lie detector tests, sign affidavits. He was so concerned that the evidence would be accepted in the scientific community.
We use the term solved and unsolved. And solved means that a previous person has been identified whose life matches the statements that the child made. Of the 2,500, it's probably roughly 50-50 the ones that have been solved versus not solved.
Even to his dying day in 2007, he never claimed to the scientific world, I have got the ironclad proof. Remember, he had that skeptical spirit. Nevertheless, that someone as careful as he was so strongly moved towards the possibility is, to me, a fairly powerful argument.
James Leininger was a little boy in Louisiana who began saying that his plane had crashed, that he had been shot down by the Japanese. He gave some very specific details. In fact, this was when he was 2. His parents were able to ask him questions about these horrific nightmares he had about plane crash. And he was able to say that he'd been shot down by the Japanese and that his plane had flown from the Natoma, is what he named the boat that his plane had taken off of. In addition, the boy later saw a picture of Iwo Jima and said that was where he was shot down. Also began saying that he was the 3rd James. When his dad searched online, he eventually found that there was the USS Natoma Bay. The Natoma Bay was involved in the Iwo Jima operation. There was one pilot from the Natoma that was killed in Iwo Jima, and his name was James Houston, Jr. So James Leininger would be the 3rd James after the Jr. Another detail that James gave was that he had a friend named Jack Larson, and it turned out that there was another pilot on the Natoma named Jack Larson. The child was talking about a past life from more than 50 years before, which is unusual in our cases. So there was seemingly no way that he could have known the details that he came up with.
But then Houston.
His father was an evangelical Christian who was totally resistant to reincarnation. But his son gave out so much information about World War II. They said, you know, he could not have learned this watching Sesame Street.
I saw the view.
I think that what reincarnates, as far as one can tell from all the literature and so on, is the essential self.
When I was about 2 years old, I told my mother that my name was not really Barbro, it was Anne.
Barbara was born in 1954 in Sweden to a Christian family. And they had no idea who Anne Frank was because the diary of Anne Frank had not yet been translated and published in Sweden.
I know my name was Anne Frank, but they insist calling me on Barbro. And my parents insisted me to call them Mom and Pa, and I knew they were not my real parents.
Well, her parents thought this was all fantasy until something happened when she was 10 years old. By this time, the parents knew who Anne Frank, the historic figure, was. And they went on a tour of European cities, including Amsterdam, where the Anne Frank house is located.
We were at the hotel room, and my father said that let's do the Anne Frank house first. So I called for a cab. And I found myself saying to them, we don't need a cab, we're not far away. And I knew exactly where we were.
And her parents said, how could you know? You've never been here. And she said, well, I know, let me show you. And she took him by the hand and led him on a 10-minute walk through the winding streets of Amsterdam directly to the Anne Frank house.
And then when we came up towards the house, I saw that the steps outside were different, were changed. So I stopped and I said, it's strange, they have changed those steps. When I came into that house, it was the most horrifying feeling I have ever had. Because all of a sudden I was back to my dreams. I recognized everything I had seen ever since I was a little child.
And Barbara looked at a wall in a room where Anne had spent time, and she said to her mother, look, the pictures of the movie stars are still on the wall.
I saw all these pictures from newspaper magazines that was cut out. And it was from movie stars and song stars and things. I said to my mother, look, the pictures are still there. And it was like almost coming home. And she said, what pictures? And she looked on the wall, and I looked on the wall, and there were no pictures there.
She got confused, started to cry, and the mother said, well, let's ask the tour guide. And the tour guide said, yes, indeed, the photos that Anne Frank had clipped are normally on that wall, but we took them down because people were touching them, taking them. We're going to put them under glass and then put them back. And her parents at that point realized she was not having fantasies, that she was having memories of a past lifetime. Barbara not only had the memories, she also replicated the talent of Anne Frank and was a child prodigy writer.
It was everything from poetry to little stories, thoughts about the higher power, reincarnation, where we came from, where we were going, but nothing that I had memories from being Anne Frank or anything, because I had decided not to talk about it anymore.
And Barbara had her first book published at age 12, and she had another 8 or 9 books published in her teenage years. And her first book became the best-selling prose book in Swedish history. And guess what? Barbara has the same face as Anne Frank.
There's certainly evidence from our cases that there can be these memories from past lives that are in children. Now, evidence is not the same thing as proof, but there's no question that there is empirical evidence for it.
Okay, thank you. I don't know what that ISIS.net is. Okay. So I just thought if I can throw a few clips in it, because you can't tell a story better than actually seeing the people either investigating it or telling their story personally. So I thought I'd do a combination of my personal experiences and some that were found on the internet. So if I talk about my past life regression, it's something, as a therapist and a person who does hypnotherapy, I'm aware that there's a massive potential to heal any of this life situations if we look back at a past life experience. There's an awful lot of people claiming that they went back to a past life and their situations changed. So I was curious to see, well, first of all, have I been here before? Because I feel like I'm a bit of an old soul. But also, can it heal things? Can I progress in this life and do the emotional healing as part of this as a process? So I went to see a local hypnotherapist, Steve Burgess, and his niche, if you like, is doing past life regressions. It's not the cheapest, but it's what he's done for a long time. So he's written this book, it's Famous Past Lives, and this is an account of people he's actually hypnotised who, a bit like the lady on there who claims to be having memories of Anne Frank. There's other people in this book that lots of famous people they've been in a past life. So that's an easy read, and it's very interesting. And again, it's an account of his personal experiences as he's documented them. So in my past life regression, if I can explain the process when we actually hypnotise somebody, once we get somebody to a heightened state of relaxation, we then gain an access to the subconscious mind. And that subconscious mind actually knows an awful lot that you don't know consciously, what you're feeling with your 5 senses. So what you see right now, or you perceive right now, is just the tip of the iceberg. But the thing that makes up the whole being the consciousness, the element of that, it's massive, you know. And when you start looking into past life stuff, there's an awful lot that, for me personally, is looking like our soul collects the energetic experiences and it adds soul enhancement or value to our consciousness. So it's really interesting that you can put somebody into this hypnotic state and then ask them to go back in time. And one of the first things we do when we actually get somebody to go back in time, we get them to look down at the feet and we say, what you're wearing on your feet. So when Steve Burgess said that to me, I was at a steamy train station, all this steam coming off and these people kept getting out of the train, and he had boots on and I knew I was a man. And I went back up to this big mansion, and in there I felt like I was out of my league, like I was with wealthy people but I wasn't from their world. But for some reason I got this fast track promotion in this regression. And I saw this woman with ringlets in her hair from the side. And I felt like in my mind that was going to be my wife, but I couldn't see her face and she didn't turn round. Could have been making it up, could have been my imagination, and these thoughts were actually going through my mind as I was actually under hypnosis. Am I making this up? Because that's quite common, your thoughts come in. I don't want to sort of create suggestions. But as it progressed, I ended up being stood at the side of a battle. And I'm a proper girly girl. And all of a sudden, there's thousands of soldiers coming over this hill. And they had white trousers, black boots, red jackets, sashes on, and bayonets. And they were just literally all over coming over this hill. And I was at the side of the battle. I wasn't in it, but I was observing it. And I looked around, there was straw on fire, overturned carts, as I described it then. And there was brown horses, I saw lots of brown horses. So I sort of got my friend to make notes, and I thought, oh, that was interesting, mainly because I wouldn't think about wars or uniforms. You've asked me what war was where or what uniform was where, I didn't have a clue. So that made me think that I haven't made this up because of who I am as a person in this particular experience. And that week, this always happens to me, synchronicities, I was watching something on TV, it was a programme called The Ascent of Money, and in this programme there was a reenactment of this guy in a uniform getting out of a tent. And it said Battle of Waterloo. And I thought, that's the uniform, and they're saying the Battle of Waterloo. So I thought, it triggered my curiosity. So I decided then to do the trusted Google check and have a look on Google. And what I was actually thinking about at the time was, have I made this up? I don't know, I just want to get some facts. Oh, there's one other fact here that I've just neglected to say, that in this regression, I actually went back to the field years later as a man with a grey beard, paying respects to the people who died. And again, the fact I'd done that, it just seemed to fit with the theme of what I'd experienced in this past life regression. So then I decided to go on Google and do some research. And I was floored when I saw this picture, because straw on fire, carts, I said carts overturned, but that was cannons, the uniforms there, brown horses. And I thought, logical brain, have I seen this picture before as a child and forgotten it, and subconsciously known it's the Battle of Waterloo? So I decided to stop looking on the internet, because I didn't want to plant suggestions in my own mind for if I go back and get regressed again, because I want to trust what comes up from my subconscious mind, then I can research it after. Because the validation bit is actually the fun part for me for past life regression. I love it when we actually investigate what people come out with, and I love seeing the shock on people's faces when some of the stuff is validated. For me, what it was like, because it's different for everybody. Some people, when they get regressed, they're right in it, and they can feel the emotions, and they'll have lots of tears, and they'll be really, really in it. And then other people, like me, it was like I was observing it. I felt the energy was me, and there was a part of me thinking, am I just observing something else, somebody else's memory? But how it felt was, this was potentially me. That's the only way I can describe it. Could I have imagined it? And I said, probably not, because I'm so feminine in my outlook. And then the painting, I'd have seen it before, but one of the things that was interesting was when I did the research, it said that the people at the side of the battle were the officers and artists. And it was quite interesting that I was at the side of the battle. Now, I can't draw for toffee these days, so that's a skill that's not carried on in this life, if that's the case. However, you know, it's interesting, and then I started to investigate the Duke of Wellington and thinking, oh God, I don't want to be him. You know, it's like, and that is really a common fear when people come to me for past life regressions. They're frightened that they were Hitler or Pol Pot or, you know, something that was like horrendous, and they're going to trigger some layers of guilt and shame that they've not resolved and brought into this life. And what we do it in a very careful way. We tell people we're not going to take you to something that's going to be scary, harmful, and you can always leave it. So we do reassure people. However, there was one guy when I was training, even though I told him you're not going to go to anywhere, you know, scary, he went to, the day he was going to be murdered in prison, he was going to be hung in prison for stealing some bread, which was a bit, and it freaked him out a bit, and that was when, in the early days before I actually knew what I was doing. So, I'm pleased to know I know what I'm doing now, fingers crossed. So what I thought is, I'll give this case study is a little bit more detail of the one that was just on the previous film, because there are facts and figures in it. I could stand here and tell you about it, but I think it's better if you can watch it on a movie.
They have the same name and boyish good looks. James M. Houston, raised in the Midwest. James M. Leininger, a young boy from the Bayou.
Whoa! There's something in the eyes. It's undeniable.
That's not all they share.
Somehow James Houston's spirit has affected my son, either through reincarnation. I don't know how it happened.
I can read the Japanese easy as pie.
Initially, what caught my attention was James's extreme fascination with airplanes.
And every night he slept with his G.I. Joe action figures, which he named.
I took him to the Cavanaugh Flight Museum.
Here's home video. While the other kids casually look at the plane, 2-year-old James seems to inspect it. Watch as he checks the underbelly, then climbs inside, donning the headset.
I said, oh look, there's a bomb on the bottom. He said, that's not a bomb, that's a drop tank.
Bouncing about in the cockpit, James was flying high. That night, their world would change forever.
He started having the nightmares, and that was my first indication that there was something wrong. It was a panic-stricken, terrorized screaming.
Over and over again, James had this same terrible nightmare, 4 to 5 times a week. He was too young to explain the dream, but he could draw.
Bombing ships, you see men parachuting. Here's another one where planes are dropping bombs.
Help me.
He would just be crying. He'd say, airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out. He laid on his back and kicked up at the ceiling, and he goes, Mama, the little man's going like this. And he laid on his back and kicked his feet up. The little man's going, ooh, 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 can't get out. And I said, well, who's the little man, baby? And he goes, me. I thought Bruce and I were just gonna faint.
They questioned, what kind of plane?
Corsair.
Why did your airplane crash?
My plane was shot down.
Who shot your plane?
He looked at me like I was a village idiot. He said,
The Japanese. I kept thinking, where's he getting this? I was a stay-at-home mom, so I know that there wasn't anything that he was being exposed to.
Not exposed to in this life, but perhaps, just maybe, somebody else was. Decades earlier, James Houston grew up with the same insatiable fascination with airplanes. He became a naval fighter pilot and fought in World War II. March 3rd, 1945, during a mission near Iwo Jima, he took a direct hit. At age 21, was declared missing and presumed dead.
where did he take off from a boat?
Do you remember the name of your boat? He said Natoma.
Found several thousand hits on the word Natoma.
The USS Natoma Bay launched into battle, headed for Iwo Jima in the fight for Lady Gulf.
It's the biggest naval battle in the history of the world.
Leo Pipe served on the ship. From his home in Ohio, he organizes the Natoma Bay reunions. That's how Bruce found him.
I wanted to disprove it.
He asked a few questions about, did I know some of the people? Oh yeah, I remember those people. And so he got very quiet.
It was all real. The people and places James described actually existed. And remember those G.I. Joe dolls that James named? Turns out, 3 men with the same names, first and last, served on the Natoma and were killed in action. James said, They greeted him in heaven after his crash.
I'd always asked him, do you remember what your name was? And he always said James. But his name is James.
Yes, there was a Jim Houston, or rather large shell, just hit him in the engine, and it burst into flames and went down.
They showed Leo the drawings.
He was right on the nose. I'm sure, in my mind, that he was there.
Leo invited James, now 3, to the reunion. James recognized several pilots, even called them by name.
You're Bob Greenwald. I'm serious.
He never met Bob Greenwald.
No, he'd never met him before.
And someone else was invited. James Houston's sister, Anne.
And he goes, it's not Anne, it's Annie. She wasn't my oldest sister. I had an older sister than that. And I said, you did? Who was that? And he goes, Ruth. I mean Ruth.
Annie is what they called me when I was little. Knowing my name and my sister's name, things that my brother did when he was a kid. It's too amazing to describe how he would feel that way, but he does. He considers me his sister.
But does she consider James her brother?
I think it's probably a reincarnation of my brother.
Anne was so touched, she gave James items from her brother's final effects.
The little George Washington bust had been on my brother's desk all through school.
I said, where's the statue? He said, I put it on my desk.
As James gets older, his memories of James Houston and the nightmares are beginning to fade. But his knowledge of airplanes and his passion for flying continues to soar.
The Corsair was my favorite fighter. The Corsair was fast. Agility was very good.
Why him?
James has never said anything about why he's here.
One of God's unexplained mysteries.
Okay, I thought it just, again, it puts a bit more evidence behind it, so you can just see the people it relates to. And if you look on the internet, there is lots of rubbish on there, don't get me wrong, but there's also some really good, credible things to actually consider when you start to delve down this. So there are lots of examples of people telling their stories and matching. Obviously, just like me up here today, you can only rely on their account of how they've proven it to themselves. So it's very difficult, a subject, to actually prove that it is real. However, if you go down the route of maybe getting a past life regression and etc., all I'd say is keep an open mind about it. It's really interesting when you start to open your mind to the concept of these kind of things. Can I just ask, before I go on and give you a few of my personal case studies, who in this room here has had a past life regression? Anybody? And anyone had something really interesting to share? Yeah, so I get a microphone over here if that's okay. Sorry. We've got the radio mic.
Catherine's got it.
Oh.
She did have.
So we could just give it to Chris here. Oh, thanks, Glenn. Sorry, I did a bit of I just think it's interesting to hear personal accounts because we can...
Give it
to Chris, thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris. I recently qualified as a clinical hypnotherapist like Joe, and I have a very scientific background. I have a degree in psychology and I did it as a Bachelor of Science, and I regard myself as a scientist. So I was quite cynical about past life regression. I went into hypnotherapy because I believe in the power of the mind, and I'm passionate about our ability to heal ourselves. But when I was very open to the training, so I wanted for the people that were using me to train on in that particular session, I wanted it to work for them, I suppose. And when I was hypnotised, the way they do it is you create like a bridge between this world and the past in your imagination, in that subconscious state. And so that can be like the idea of a bridge. With me, it was a bit like a mirror. I don't know if any of you have watched Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange lately, but they have when you go into a mirror and when you cross over through a mirror, you're in the past. And I was actually wide awake and very lucid, and I was approaching the mirror and thinking, this isn't going to work, you know, and I was almost disappointed with the person because I thought, I'm not going to have to come up, you know, be able to come up with anything. I didn't want to make it up, and you know, I didn't want, you know, I'm a useless liar anyway, so it wouldn't have been a very good story. But the minute that I stepped through in my imagination in that mirror, I found myself on a hillside in an unfamiliar landscape with a castle in the background, you know, in the distance. That's the word. Thank you. And as you say, the first thing we do is to get people to look down at their feet and find out what they're wearing. And I felt strange because I felt female, but I had very male hobnail, sort of like very masculine boots and masculine clothes. And I felt like, and they said, is somebody with you? And I said, yeah, my brother Robert. And they said, what's your name? And I said, my name was Soraya. And they said, oh, that's an unusual name. And I said, well, yes, because my mother is foreign, but my father is English. So my surname was Trent, but my first name was a foreign name. And to cut a very long story short, I felt like I'd sort of disguised myself as a man to accompany to my brother, and we were trying to get my father out of this castle. And then they progressed me to the day before I died, which is quite common, isn't it, for them to not take you to the day of your death the day before, so it's not as traumatic. And I just felt that I'd been out riding and I'd stopped in sort of like an outhouse or a building, and I had something a bit like tuberculosis or emphysema. I had like a chest complaint, and I died there on my own. And I can't explain it because I was very cynical about it. As I say, I couldn't make all that up, and so it was quite a strange experience.
Thank you, Chris. So, thank you. So, the reason I wanted to bring somebody in who's had the experience is because if somebody else is telling you out their experience of it, you can resonate with it a little bit more. So, sorry, is that okay? Yeah. I thought I'd try and get people in, so if anybody wants to share something at the end of their experiences, because I like to evaluate things, and what I'll do is I'll talk through the case studies that I've got here and how we evaluated it after, and what was the purpose of it, because quite right what Chris said, not only do we take people to the moment they die, we actually take them up to that moment after they've died and look back on the life and think about what they've actually learned from that life experience and what valuable lessons can be brought into this life experience. And that's where the healing really does take place with hypnotherapy, when you go to that in-between stage and you understand when you look back on the life. So one of my case studies, I used to volunteer at a local hospice, and when I first started doing hypnotherapy, I felt it was a bit gimmicky, but it actually turned out to be something that I actually liked, and I did past life regression parties. So I had a group of nurses from the hospice, 8 of them, came to one of the nurses' house, and they were all sat down in a group of chairs, and when we do more than 3 people, I always take another hypnotherapist with me, because we can have something called an abreaction, so we always like to make sure that the people we're actually putting under hypnosis are in a safe place. So how it works with a group regression is I ask questions, none of them speak, and I plant the suggestion that when they awaken, they will remember very vividly and very clearly everything that they've seen, the dates, the names, the places. So I'll ask things like, where are you? Are you outside or inside? What the buildings like, how the buildings, what you're wearing on your feet, what you're wearing on your clothes, have you got hair, and what colour's your hair, what you're eating, what utensils are you using to eat, who's king and queen at that time. So we have these specific list of questions, and we ask as many questions as we can. Sometimes they say, I don't know, can't get it. For some people they get it like that. Some people you have to keep going at it from a different angle. So what I've learnt from working with people, everybody's different. There's not one standard approach, and we just ask lots of questions and then document or record what people come up with. Then we research it on the internet afterwards. And that's the bit I love, because people do it for a bit of fun, and I say it's not to prove past lives exist, but it's a bit of an entertaining moment where we do this past life regression. This one nurse, she actually came out of this regression and she wrote down all her answers. And then we started to look on the internet and it said that she was Mary. She got her father's name correct at the time, her mother's name, I can't remember what they are. I wish I'd put more details and actually had some more tangible evidence for you now. And also the place they lived was in Leicester in the UK. The year was 1835 and the father was a butcher, and she also mentioned that the church they were buried at. So we went on Google and all of the facts, every single one of them checked out. And it was like, everyone was like, oh my God, and it was like, and everyone else was disappointed because theirs was so thorough that, you know, it was unbelievable that how can you just get that out of thin air? Now there is a question, you know, because some people say it's my past life, my past memory. There is a potential that if there's a matrix of information outside of us, we could potentially be pulling into the memories of other experienced energies that are there and we're just tuning into it. So there's no way at this moment for me personally to actually validate the Battle of Waterloo thing that I talked about is proof. However, I'm open-minded and it felt like it could be. And that's the only thing I'll say about it. But it still surprised me when I saw that painting and saw the facts matching what I'd seen. So another one. Now this one was really interesting. A really good friend of mine who's very, very spiritual. She's always been very intuitive. She can see spirit, etc. She's always been a very gentle being and a loving being. And when we actually took her back to a past life, now bear in mind this is a lady who has a wonderful life, lovely husband that she loves, 2 children that she loves. So she's very happy with a lot here. You know, she knows how lucky she is and she's very positive and optimistic at life. But when we took her back, she actually went to a different planet. And she said she was from Pleiades. And sometimes when you get people under hypnosis, you can literally see people's energy change when they connect to a certain level of consciousness. And there was a shift in her energy level like nothing I've ever seen before. And she was flooding with tears, but there were tears of joy. And she was saying how beautiful it was. And she felt this overwhelming sense of love, like nothing she'd ever felt before. And she was saying things like, I want to go back home. I don't belong here. So I asked her, why have you come here? So I just ask questions, I just go with what comes up at the time. And she basically said that she was here to anchor the light, to bring a higher vibrational energy to Earth. And she said there were lots of her, people like her, from Pleiades right now, who are coming here for this time to anchor the light and to raise the vibration of this planet. And it was just really fascinating to see this. So after I saw this, I actually started to research Pleiades a lot more and try and understand it, because the descriptions that she gave were astounding. You know, yes, you could have read it, but this is a person who I consider to be very honest. You know, a bit like what Chris said, she didn't seem to want to make anything up. And the reaction in her energy field and how she changed was wonderful to see, and it absolutely reinforced my belief in past lives and ETs and aliens as well, because, you know, as you start to look into more stuff like this and become more conscious, you get more open-minded about other things. So, another one that I did was, I think, Jan, you might have been at this one, it was what I did at Heritage. So there was a shop in Hessel where someone had arranged a past life regression. I think there was probably about 8 people again. And oh, it is yours. I didn't even know it was yours, Jan. Sorry. There we go. We've got the person. Are you okay if I share this? Yeah. Okay. It's a good job, isn't it? At least you know I'm not making it up. So I didn't really know Jan at that time. So what was happening, what I do, I ask these questions, where are you? So it was Macedonia in Greece. The year was 147 BC. And I asked the question like, who's the ruler of the land? So what happens is the people who have written down their stuff, they read it out afterwards. And then we all compare it. But as Jan was reading this out, she said, can't be right though, because the ruler's Augustus, she says, and I'm in Greece. And Augustus is a Roman emperor. And she said that I've always had this obsession with Pegasus all my life. And she said, one bit we do is ask people to go to where they're going to buy some goods. And if they're buying goods, I get them to look down and see if they've got any cash in their hands. And if it's money, is it coins or paper? And if it's coins, what does it look like? So we got this description off Jan. that it was like a man with a big nose and Pegasus on the other side. And she said it was Augustus, that it couldn't be right. So what we did then as a group, we got the laptop out and we started to look on the internet, and we found these coins, lots of coins, matching the date that Romans had actually taken over Greece, and it was a Roman emperor that was actually on the coins that we used that day. So again, it was like, this was some kind of validation that went above and beyond, because the person who was giving us the information said it can't be right. So again, another interesting point there, you know, was a bit of validation around what we're doing here. So what I thought I'll do, do you want to have a break now? Do you have a quick break, and then we'll come back, and I want to talk about, and I want this as a group interaction, so I've left quite a bit after this video, because this bit is literally about are we being tricked? And I'd like to try and get everybody involved in what we think reincarnation is as a group, you know, why we've got these belief systems, because I think this is a kind of subject, I don't want to just stand up here and talk at you, because I think it's based on personal experiences, and if we can get a group conversation going, this is the kind of thing I'd like to sort of stir up some thinking. So if we have a break and maybe come back in, what, about 8:55?
Thanks, Jo.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
okay,
Thank you. Cool.